What makes them mad about it? What makes them mad about it is that they had black people and white poor people and red poor people and Puerto Rican poor people and Latin American Puerto Rican people of poor people of all descents. They had them caught up in movements based on racism when the Black Panther Party stood up and said that we don't care what anybody says. We don't think you fight fire with fire best. We think you fight fire with water best. We're going to fight racism, not with racism, but we're going to fight with solidarity. We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. We stood up and said we're not going to fight reactionary pigs and reactionary state's attorneys like this and reactionary state's attorneys like Hanrahan with any other reactions on our part. We're going to fight their reactions where all of us people are getting together and have an international proletarian revolution. Right on. Right on.
I'm a Killer Mike fan. I like Killer Mike. I think that he is a, great voice on the left. I like his music. The more I hear it, I dig his music. So it's political. It's beats. It just he makes good music. He's he came out. He was great. Bernie surrogate, I think is the correct. I don't know if he was directly working on the campaign in some other capacity as well, but he was a big part of the Bernie movement, and definitely just respect all of his work there. And he's an important voice on the left, and he's a prominent voice on the left and on the black left as well, especially. And so got nothing but the utmost respect for Killer Mike. He's been out there doing much more than I have done to forward the movement. And so I am not, here. So I just want to, run that disclaimer right off the top here. If anything that I say sounds overly critical, it's not of Killer Mike, the person, or anything like that here. So on this next story here, we have, so this is from CNN Business. Killer Mike's new black-owned bank received tens of thousands of account requests in less than 24 hours. A new majority Black and Latinx owned and operated digital bank hopes to make supporting Black-owned banks and businesses a little easier for consumers. Greenwood was created by Bounce TV founder Ryan Glover and his close friend, rapper activist Michael Killer Mike Render. The leadership team at Greenwood, which includes former Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young, unveiled their new platform on Thursday after raising more than $3 million in seed funding in June. Glover has been working on Greenwood since early 2019, but he said interest in the venture spiked after the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis sparked a nationwide reckoning with racism that has inspired many Americans, including many in the corporate world, to support Black-owned businesses and financial institutions. While the bank doesn't open until January, the company launched its website on Thursday, and there is already a waiting list for those who want to open a Greenwood account. Quote, I will say we're in the tens of thousands, end quote, Glover told CNN Business on Friday. Quote, that number is increasing by the day. So what is Greenwood? Like its competitors Chime, Aspiration, Moneyline, and Vero, Greenwood is a digital bank whose financial services, including checking and savings accounts, mobile deposits, and peer-to-peer transfers, are fulfilled almost entirely online. The bank offers a global ATM network, Apple and Android Pay services, and 2-day advances on paychecks for customers who sign up for direct deposit. Unlike its peers, however, Greenwood's target audiences are Black and Latinx communities and anyone else who wants to support Black-owned businesses. Glover says the bank will specialize in financing Black and Latinx entrepreneurs who typically have a harder time securing loans from mainstream commercial banks. In order to build wealth, you need bank capital, Glover said. We will identify qualified entrepreneurs, business owners, and creatives to equip them with the capital needed to make their dreams a reality. Greenwood is named after the former Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, an early 20th century African-American business community that was so prosperous it was nicknamed Black Wall Street. A mob of white Americans destroyed the Greenwood district during the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. So why bank black? Before it was destroyed nearly a century ago, Glover said, $1 spent in Tulsa's Greenwood district would circulate 36 times before leaving the community. Today, $1 circulates for 20 days in the white community, but only 6 hours in the Black community, Render said in a written statement. Black Americans are twice as likely to be denied mortgage loans by traditional banks, but minority depository account institutions have a better track record of lending to non-white individuals. This lack of fairness in the financial system is why we created Greenwood, render added. Here you got a, Killer Mike, like I said, somebody that I have the utmost respect for and am not trying to disrespect in any way here, but definitely doesn't mean that we shouldn't be critical of our peers. And so I gotta be critical here. All I'm seeing here is Black capitalism. And, I like the idea. Listen, I think that it's a good idea, like it's a decent thing. Like it's one small step in the right direction. It's one small step in the right direction. But I'm going to bring in some clips from Fred Hampton. I'm going to play a few clips from Fred Hampton that I think really speak to what Killer Mike's doing here. And honestly, I just want to tie these two things together because I think that I can't possibly say it better than Fred Hampton Sr. My issue with it is that it's just one small step in the right direction and just doesn't move us far enough to what we need to move towards. And this is the kind of endeavor that consumes a lot of your time. Like, this is going to consume a lot of Killer Mike's time. This is what he's putting his time and effort into. And unfortunately, while I think it's a seemingly noble cause, like I understand where he's coming from, I think it will fall short for the reasons that Fred Hampton is about to point out here. It's a bit disappointing. I mean, who am I? It's not like Killer Mike's worried about disappointing me, but it is just like I would expect bigger, better things of someone like Killer Mike, because he had a vision with these things, understanding the systemic problems and understanding I thought he had a grasp and an understanding of the systemic problems of capitalism. And so it's just unfortunate to me that his solution to capitalism is Black capitalism. I mean, you can hear them all up and down this article talking about, Black people need capital. We need capital. Listen, sure, capital matters. You got to have a startup. You got to have some way to fund your whatever movement, whatever the hell it is. You call it what you want to call it. It's capital, or whatever starting money that you start with. That's capital, right? But this is going to, when you don't fundamentally try to change the system and say, listen, if he was coming out with a bank that was going to support, folks I wish Killer Mike would team up with Cooperation Jackson and put $3 million into that effort of building, democratic workplaces and supporting democratic workplaces, and there are Black run worker cooperatives. There's Jackson, Mississippi is a perfect example of they're gaining political power there. It would be a perfect place for him to partner up with some folks, with Black folks that have a mission that is really trying to change the system, make fundamental changes to the system. And I just don't think that what he's doing here goes anywhere near that. So we'll hear from Fred Hampton here, and let me just bring in Fred Hampton to talk about Black capitalism and as well as banking, Black banking essentially, and his thoughts on that. So it's two clips. The first clip that we're going to listen to is him talking about banking, specifically in Black banking.
What about this bank?
Credit union?
Mm-hmm.
Credit union.
Credit union, my brother.
Is a bank.
Are you hip to credit unions?
It is a bank.
Yeah, you go and borrow money?
Yeah. It's a bank.
It's a bank. Owned by the people, run for the people, and by the people.
Mm-hmm. What would money be given out to people for?
Well, the people would decide that.
You want to buy?
Whatever, the people in the community decide.
You need some living room furniture, maybe? You need a car, maybe?
See, the thing is with me, you dig, I need to know some more about it. I wish you had some more literature about the educational thing here. Because, you dig, as far as we're concerned in the struggle, the way we look at struggle is that this depends on the educational thing, you dig. Because
this depends on the education.
Well, the whole thing.
No, but in the end, this does. You can form this with no education. You can form this and this.
No, not the way we're talking about forming it. Right. We're talking about forming it right. It's not on the paper. We didn't write it on the paper.
You can form it right with no education.
No.
Let me give you an example. Yomo Kenyatta formed the excellent revolution with no education. And on the end thing, Yomo told the motherfucker, said, well, you've been educated to hate the enemy, but I'm your brother. I'll help you lead the revolution. Now I'm going to oppress you. Another example, Papa Doc in Haiti. Papa Doc in Haiti hated everything white. Man, you couldn't put this white paper in front of Papa Doc's face. But he moved all the white people out and he took over and be oppressor. He did, cause of no education. And the people that had been educated, they just said that we don't hate the motherfucking white people, we hate the oppressor, whether he be white, black, brown, or yellow. So we got to know the educational program to find out what is going to be in the finale. A lot of people, Jomo Kenyatta is called not a never a revolutionary, but an ex-revolutionary. So is Papa Doc. They brought on a successful revolution. That thing in the Mao's was a bitch. Bantu freedom fighters, all that kind of action. What we're saying is that it's the end. But you don't judge Castro now. You can't do it. Nobody in this room could judge whether Castro's going to be a revolutionary or not. You know what I mean? We're talking about things, you know what I mean, with China, the People's Republic, and even at the stage they're in now, talking about even going on further into a communistic state. That's what we're talking about. Those are revolutionary. So we got to understand here the educational program that you have to be able to figure out whether it will go on the right lines where the people will end up in a situation where they can be able to really control themselves. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, the people that take this local foundation and start stealing money because they won't be really educated to why it's the people's thing anyway. You understand what I'm saying? With no education, you have neo-colonialism instead of colonialism, like you got in Africa now, like you got in Haiti. So what we're talking about is there has to be an educational program. That's very important. As a matter of fact, it's so important for us that a person has to go through 6 weeks of our political education before he can consider himself a member of the party, able to even run down ideology for the party. Why? Because if they don't have an education, then they're nowhere. You dig what I'm saying? They're nowhere because they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing. You might get people caught up in the emotionalist movement. You understand me? You might get them caught up in because they're poor and they want something. And then if they're not educated, they want more. And before you know it, they'll be capitalists. And before you know it, we have Negro imperialists.
This is what we run the risk of with black capitalism. The problem is the system. It's not the color of the people who are running the system. He talked about how Fred Hampton talked about how, Papa Doc in Haiti, he hated everything white, and, he hated white people. He led a revolution, and then he became the oppressor himself. But he said, if you would ask those people, they wouldn't have cared whether it was, white, black, or whatever. They don't want anybody oppressing them, right? The people don't want anybody oppressing them. And so they don't care who it is or what the color of the person happens to be. This is, it's like, we did a story on Attorney General Daniel Cameron in Kentucky. It's a black attorney general who's out there doing a cover-up against, committing this cover-up against Breonna Taylor and damaging, destroying, a black family and in a black communities. And that's all you'll get with that's all we're ever going to get. If our solution is black capitalism or rainbow capitalism, if our solution is diversify our oppressors, then it's still, I don't want any oppressor. I don't care what the color of the foot is in the boot on my neck. Like that's not the issue of concern. It's the boot on my neck, not the color of the foot that happens to be in it. So I don't, I just, if with this sort of solution and when this is the effort that you're putting forth from Killer Mike, I can't help but see this as a setting himself up for failure here. Essentially, it will move the needle like, this much, and sure, it'll be slightly better, but all you're going to get is black people exploiting other black people and brown people and maybe some poor white people. Ooh, yay. That's not my goal. My goal isn't to have the racially and in gender proportionality, in the oppressive class and ruling class. Like, I don't want there to be a ruling class. And the way that we stop there from being a ruling class, like, this isn't for somebody who believes in fighting against Medicare for all, fighting for Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, fight for 15, like, that is not how you push these things forward. And we've seen countless examples. I mean, there's black capitalists all over Africa that exploit the shit out of their people. Like they exploit them. And so why do we think that this situation is going to be any different, that black Americans are somehow not going to exploit other black Americans? No, they're black capitalists. They're going to exploit. It's inherent. In order to succeed in the system of capitalism, you have to exploit others. If we're going to be doing black capitalism, while some black people are going to be able to amass, we'll just have a black Jeff Bezos. Like, that's what Killer Mike is going to. This effort is going to work towards, is working to get us the black Jeff Bezos. I don't want it. That's not the solution to the ills of the black community at large, black communities, let me say, because there's no one black community, but black communities at large. That is not what is ailing us, is that we don't have enough black capitalists. We don't have enough black wealthy people. I don't want a handful of black wealthy folks and a whole bunch of poor black people. We got that. We got Beyonce and Oprah, and we can see you can get black, wealthy people. It doesn't help the rest of us to, when they happen to be rich and the rest of us are still out here suffering every day. Yep. I mentioned, Tammy, says, Daniel Cameron, who we mentioned, is just another example of those sorts of the black faces in high places. And Jim Clyburn out there, just these people that will sell out, and that's who the system will incentivize those sort of folks and will elevate those sort of folks, and that's who we'll get. So when I see this, let me play one more clip from Fred Hampton here that this just reminding me of. This is a much shorter clip, so really quick clip from Fred Hampton here, just talking about how we should fight against capitalism. Should we use black capitalism to fight against capitalism?
What makes them mad about it is that they had black people and white poor people and red poor people and Puerto Rican poor people and Latin American Puerto Rican people of poor people of all descents. They had them caught up in movements based on racism when the Black Panther Party stood up and said that we don't care what anybody says. We don't think you fight fire with fire best. We think you fight fire with water best. We're going to fight racism, not with racism, but we're going to fight it with solidarity. We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. We stood up and said we're not going to fight reactionary pigs and reactionary state's attorneys like this and reactionary state's attorneys like Hanrahan with any other reactions on our part. We're going to fight their reactions where all of us people are getting together and have an international proletarian revolution. Right on. And that's saying all power to the people. Right on. That's saying that no matter what color you are, there's only two classes. And that's saying that there's a class over here and there's a class over there. And the reason that this class over here has never did anything to get this class off its back, because this is lower, this is upper, this is the oppressed, this is the oppressor, this is the exploited, this is the exploiter. And these people in this class have divided themselves. They say, I'm black and I hate white people. I'm white and I hate black people. I'm Latin American and I hate hillbillies. I'm hillbilly and I hate Indians. So we fighting amongst each other.
So that's Fred Hampton dropping knowledge like he always does. If you're not familiar with Fred Hampton, check him out. That was a great black leader in the Black Panther movement who was assassinated by Chicago police and the FBI in his home in front of, laying in bed asleep next to his pregnant wife. At the time she ended up surviving. She had a son, Fred Hampton Jr., who's still alive to this day. But that was Fred Hampton Sr. assassinated by Chicago police at 22 years of age, I believe 22 or 23. So, and he was so accomplished before that. It blows my mind. So somebody that I definitely look up to, and never learned about him, never even knew his name until after I was over 25 years old before I ever even heard his name. You can go through college in the United States, you can be considered a smart person and never have ever heard of Fred Hampton Sr. So it just shows you, how, intelligence is all subjective. So some of the things that he said in there, and I let the clip play out a little bit longer because it's just such a damn good clip, and I just love it. So he said we don't fight, we're not going to fight racism with racism. We're going to fight racism with solidarity. You don't fight capitalism with black capitalism. We're going to fight capitalism with socialism. You don't fight capitalism with black capitalism. You fight capitalism with socialism. So I think, that's something that just sticks with me. That quote comes up in my mind all the time. This is, I think, the unfortunate mistake that Killer Mike is making in opening this bank is that this is black capitalism. And I know where it leads. And it's to the same situation that what white capitalism has done for white people, which is to create an upper class and an underclass. Just anywhere that capitalism exists, it doesn't matter what the color of the people that are in it. You get three things inside of capitalism, wherever it exists. You get one, innately anti-democratic institutions. So inherently anti-democratic institutions are built under capitalism. How you have a structure that is created whereby a handful of people, a small handful of people, the board of directors, the employer, and their major shareholders are able to make all the decisions about for the masses of people. Usually you have about 10 or 20 people on the board of directors in a company that has thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of employees. And so you have a small handful of people, the board of directors and major shareholders, that are able to decide where to work, who gets to work, when you work, how you work, and what gets done with all the profits of that work. And so that small handful of people gets to make all those decisions in a capitalist, organization, which is anti-democratic because those are unelected people. You, the worker, don't get to elect your boss. You don't go and elect your boss. Your boss gets to pick and choose you, and they get to choose you. They have the hiring power. They have the firing power. So they have all the power in that situation, and you, the worker, have none. And that's the situation that capitalism creates. Wherever it exists, that system is enacted. That's inherent to the system. That is how capitalism works. That's what capitalism is: employer and employee. And that's how the employer is structured. So 1, it's inherently anti-democratic. 2, it's inherently unequal. It creates wealth inequality. So the rich get richer, the poor get poorer under capitalism. And that cycle has continued for hundreds of years wherever capitalism has existed. And then 3, it is innately unstable. Sorry. So it is 3, it is innately unstable. So where you have every 4 to 7 years on average, wherever capitalism has existed in the world, every 4 to 7 years on average, there has been an economic downturn. They call it a business cycle, a recession, a depression. So they have all kinds of a boom bust cycle. They have all kinds of names for it. They've managed to come up with all kinds of names because they don't want to just call it what it is, which is crashes of capitalism that recur every 4 to 7 years on average, everywhere that capitalism has ever existed. I mean, look at in America here, since the start of the turn of the century, since 2000, we have had 3 major crashes of capitalism in the first 20 years of the century. So work out the math. That's one every, 6.5 years about. You have a crash of capitalism in the first just 2 decades of this century so far. We've had the dot-com crash, the dot-com bubble. We had the 2008 housing crisis. So we had the 2008 recession, and then we have the 2020, what they're calling the COVID recession, or most likely what we'll find eventually is a depression, right? So we're likely in the greatest depression in U.S. history based on the mass unemployment at historic scale that we have never experienced in this country before. And the threat of evictions that are facing millions of Americans right now, the loss of healthcare in the middle of a pandemic as well, is just indicative of a declining empire. So that's where we stand right now, and the reality is it's the system. It's not that it's white people that happen to be in control of it. Of course, the racism, and I've heard a quote recently by, I forget who it was from. I apologize because I can't attribute it to the professor that I heard giving a lecture. And he said that race and he said I would add gender. So he would add gender. So race and gender are the modalities under which capitalism exists, right? Under which class exists, right? So those are the modalities under which class exists. So our race, race and gender. And so those are just sort of the modes of class. And so those are intertwined concepts, and they're closely intertwined. But that doesn't mean that these capitalism exacerbates those problems, and it's just inherently set up to create that instability, the inequality, and the anti-democratic systems that it creates. And those are the things that, unless we change capitalism, and capitalism being defined very clearly as a system an economic system structured with an employer-employee relationship, right? You have the employer, the board of directors, the major shareholders, and the employee. And you know who you are. Anybody listening to this, you're the employee. I'll tell you that right now. You're not the employer. So we had slave, we had master and slave in slavery. We had lord and serf under feudalism. King and subject under monarchy, right? So there were and now we have employer-employee under capitalism. And the way that you end capitalism is by ending the employer-employee relationship. And building a black bank doesn't do it. If your black banks only supports, democratic workplaces, then boom, yeah, you're doing it. And I cannot wait till the day. If it doesn't happen and I'm still around and I got, enough connections and whatever the hell, I'll start the damn bank. But what we need to do is, this is how it works. In Mondragon, Spain, they started with one worker cooperative 60 years ago now. They started with one worker cooperative with 6 people. And from that, they've grown to over 100,000 people now. And they have their own banks, and they have their own university. They have their own school system. They have their own policing system. So they were able to develop their own communities out of these democratic workplaces that they started. The one democratic workplace that was started. And, I don't know if this will be the one, but as long as we start more and more of these democratic workplaces, one of them will catch on and we'll hold on. I would like to build a democratic media platform and a democratic media outlet. And this is just the start of that journey. And please, join us on that journey, support the show, help us out on that journey. Become a member of the show, patreon.com/radical democracy, links in the description box below. That's how you support the show. That's how you support workplace democracy. That's how you build these movements and how you actually overturn capitalism. You want to support those movements, please support this show, support what we're doing here. We are building democracy in the workplace, because that is the fundamental change that we need to make if we're really serious about getting these things that we say we want, like Medicare for all, and really giving healthcare, universal healthcare, housing as a human right. Like, we're not going to get housing as a human right under capitalism. It's just never going to exist under capitalism. The only way we ensure that every human being gets housed is we overthrow capitalism. And the only way we overthrow capitalism is by building democratic institutions in the place, building through dual power. We have a failing institution of capitalism. We need to replace the failing institution of capitalism with our own socialist structures. And so please support democratic workplaces wherever you are. Check out Cooperation Jackson and the work that they're doing there. Support the show here if you can, for as low as $1 a month. Check out the description box below, has links to our Patreon. Please become a member, support the show, help build democratic institutions, help overthrow capitalism and you know what? That actually connects. For our next story, let's cut to the story. I have a story of Richard Wolff on the difference between worker cooperatives and cooperatives versus capitalism. So we'll do that story next. But before I go here, I just want to say one more time, love and respect Killer Mike. I would love to have him on the show. Absolutely love to have him on the show someday. He is somebody that I have nothing but the utmost respect for. And I don't want to come across as acting like, again, we're all trying to do what we think is best. I'm confident that he is doing what he believes is the best thing to do to help move Black people forward. And so I do not begrudge him for the work that he's doing here. I have nothing but respect for it, and just want to make sure that I make that clear, and that I'm not just shitting on, Killer Mike, the person. I'm just saying that these efforts in general are going to fall short, and we should have the foresight to see why they're going to fall short. And it's because they're not replacing the system. We keep on saying the system is the problem, but if we don't replace the system, if we don't fundamentally change the system, then we will, nothing will fundamentally change for any of us.